And welcome to another STRI stream. I'm back. They've let me back out into the public again. And today I'm joined by a guest. I'm joined by Paul Woodham. Paul, do you want to introduce yourself? What is it you do at STRI?
Hi, Christian. Well, currently office bound, working here from sunny Birmingham. But as part of my role, I'm General Manager of Agronomy. So today, going to be firing lots of things your way, Chris, and sort of looking at those, the font of all knowledge.
Well, hopefully it is font of all knowledge and not an empty beaker of no knowledge. So, well, very much today, guys. I hope you're sort of joining the stream now. Looking forward to a nice active Q&A as we go through. What we're going to do, we've got a theme for today, which is all about adapting to change. Something that we're all grappling with in our sort of day-to-day lives, whether it's personal life, whether it's working life. There's a lot of stuff going on out there, and so this is an opportunity to talk about perhaps some strategies for how we might tackle that. And so that's the overriding theme. And what we're going to do, how we're going to structure this, is Paul's going to fire some questions, some topics at me, and you guys put your comments in there on the comment box. We'll then answer any questions that come up. So looking forward to a good interactive session. So Paul, do you want to kick us off? What's this all about?
Absolutely. So yeah, just really sort of hope that everybody sort of engages with this. And yeah, I'm going to talk about change. I'm going to talk about seasonal change. We're right in a period at the moment where finally the weather's getting better. I don't know how it is up in sunny Yorkshire today, but the sun's out down here. There's a glimpse of warmth. It's been a nice few days. Ironically, right at the time when the weather has improved, everybody's sat at home. They can't go out, unfortunately. But the weather is the overriding environmental stimulant for growth. At the moment, the nights have been cold, and that's been, I suppose, our sort of natural growth regulator. But what's going to happen, Chris, when the weather gets warmer? We're going to be in a position of people adapting to this change, essential maintenance. How are we going to cope with that?
Absolutely right, Paul. There's some challenges on the go. Up here in literally is sunny Yorkshire today. We have some sunshine. We've got good temperatures. I've even seen people in shorts. So that's a fair sign that the grass is going to start growing. And this is going to mean we need to think really hard about our strategy for growth, and bear in that mind what we can and can't do as part of essential maintenance on our golf course. So we need to be trying to look to maintain plant health. We need to maintain good quality surfaces, albeit no one's playing on them at the minute. They've still got to be in good condition, because if we let them go, they end up sort of not performing as we want to when we get into the playing season, when golfers can get about on the course. So very much it's about controlling growth, controlling plant health. That's critical for us. So it's not being silly with fertility. It's thinking about strategies of how nutrients going in. We don't have the wear. We don't have the damage that's being caused by wear, by play. So there's less biomass that needs to be produced. So we need to make sure that we're kind of matching our plant inputs with our plant demand in terms of nutrients.
Well, interesting you say that sort of the inputs, because it's right at a time where we might be sort of applying the spring growth products, and again we are preparing the surfaces for play, not just in golf, in all sorts of sports. We're looking at that. You're applying fertilizer, you're applying nitrogen to recover wear. From play, you're recovering wear from maintenance. These are uncharted waters. This isn't going on at the moment, so there needs to be an obvious change in tact and a reduction of what we put on, because as the nighttime temperatures are king with growth potential. When the nighttime temperatures stabilize, increase, we get a bit of warmth. We certainly get a bit of moisture. What's the role that the nitrogen pool is going to play in the soil? Is that going to be all we need, or how are we going to monitor it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've got to think about what causes growth. And I think that's fundamental to what we're talking about at the minute. We need to understand what are those factors that cause growth. We've got to have temperatures, absolutely right. Soil temperatures are creeping up. We're starting to get consistent soil temperatures for growth. Daytime temperatures are coming up. I think we'll probably end up talking a bit about GDD later on, hopefully. But as we start to get increased potential for growth, the conditions for growth are there. In temperature, there is still plenty of moisture around. Ironically, we might start to be thinking about irrigation at some points in terms of sort of freer draining areas, whether it's on a golf course, on a football pitch. But as part of that, we also then need to think the other part of that triangle is we've got water, we've got temperature, we now need to think about food. And so we can control the water and the food. We can't do too much about the temperature. So we've got to think about the forms of nitrogen, how much nitrogen we're putting on there. So in my opinion, and so Paul, sort of give us your perspective as well, in terms of sort of the amount of nitrogen we're putting on, really it's tickling at the moment. We just don't want to go dumping on 16% nitrogen granular feed at 35 grams a meter squared, because boy oh boy, at some point in the next few weeks we're going to get caught out and there's going to be a silage field, and that's not what we want. Absolutely not what we want.
Yeah, look, I mean, the understanding how do we know how much nitrogen to apply? You know, I posed this sort of question at a seminar a couple of years ago in terms of monitoring your sort of growth rate, your clip yield. And, you know, I said to the audience, right, how many people in this room measure your growth, measure your clip yield? And I think 2 people put their hand up in the audience, about 50 odd people. In reality, I said, you all do. You everybody has that conversation. How much did you get off that green? How much did you get off the pitch today? It's a bit subjective, but you've always got that sort of, you're always sort of wanting to learn, how is it growing? Now, if you get a spike in growth, is that because the feed that you put on? When you get a reduction in growth, is that because you need to feed again? Or was it because moistures could become deficient? Or the temperatures, nighttime temperatures again, gone cold and controlling it that way? So, you know, it's really difficult. I was talking earlier today with an American professor and asked, you know, how many of you do you see over in the States of monitoring clip yield? He said, there's been a big shift in it, maybe a third now, but we need to get more people doing it. Challenges right now, if you said minimal team, skeleton team, go and measure your growth. I've got far more important things to do, but I would challenge that it's actually really, really critical. And even if it is a subjective, just pay more attention to how much came off that section of pitch, how much came off that golf green. If you're boxing off, you know, just in terms of the sheer clipping going through the mower, because that in itself, if we are understanding the growth and then understanding what we're doing with mowing, is going to present either a surge or control. So I pose this to you, Chris. So let's discuss the 1/3 rule of mowing.
Yes,
of leaf coming off, right? So the nature of this skeleton team at the moment might be, I'm going to take more off in one cut. I'm going to take more than 1/3 off. Now, would we be right in saying that in itself is going to induce a stress and a growth response? Okay.
Yeah.
So, but if I overcut because I want to keep that within that 1/3, that in itself, regular cutting, is going to encourage growth.
Well, certainly you're going to be removing biomass, and the plant's got to be looking to repair and rejuvenate. So I think trying to tailor the frequency of mowing with the inputs that are going on. So we're not wanting to chase growth, we wanted to chase plant health. And that for me is should be the mantra at the moment. It's chasing plant health, not growth. I think, yes, I would absolutely agree with you. If we end up mowing more and more, we will end up forcing more and more growth potentially. Again, we've got to get the other things right in that equation. So if we have optimal water, optimal fertility, and we end up sort of trying to mow daily, then we may end up with a physiological plant response. The plant is trying to, it may end up increasing tillering, we might get a bit more vertical growth. So I think it very much is marrying this together. But you made a very good point there, Paul, which is we need to understand what's going on. We can't work in a prescriptive fashion. We're in a period of time now where I don't think anyone's been in it. It's that we haven't been able to maintain our sports services in the way we would normally do it as we want to do it.
It's bizarre, Chris. You know, for you speak to so many turfgrass managers, and it's sort of been sort of a utopia. If only I could manage without the bean play, wouldn't it be fantastic? And suddenly we are, and we're now all talking about crikey. This is causing me a problem. So I pose another question to you then. So we are understanding if we're cutting too much off, it's stimulating growth. If we're cutting too regularly, it's stimulating growth. But that's got to be adaptive to what growth we've got, and the nitrogen pool and everything else, the temperature. But if we adjust, we're talking about adjusting maintenance here, adapting to change. If we adjust our growth, our height of our swards up, that in itself, a shorter plant wants to grow more. It's its nature. So if we adjust it up from what its normal bench setting is, that again could become our sort of cultural plant growth regulator.
I mean, I think you're right. One of the things that we need to be careful of at the minute is not jumping out of winter conditioning too soon, because in reality, whilst temperatures are there, we need to be thinking about how we can maintain the height of cut. And I think sort of increasing that height of cut, not forcing the grass too much, reducing stress, not pushing it too much, really important in this equation. So I think you're absolutely spot on. We need to tailor our frequency, we need to tailor the height of cut, we need to tailor the inputs, all being driven to small little 5% improvements, incremental gains can lead to a bigger improvement overall. And I think that's what this is all about. It's tweaking, adjusting our programs. It's thinking about what we would be doing in early spring through the winter months coming into March. How would we be approaching it? And almost trying to keep that strategy for as long as we can do in place. So just interrupt there. Thanks, guys, for joining. Those folk which have just joined the stream, thank you very much. I see we've got a few questions here, a few comments that have been raised. So Rob here has said sort of bring the heights of cut up to help with pressure. Absolutely. I think that's a really valid point. Sort of we've got a comment here from Alan Smith. Appreciate what you guys are saying regards GDD, but I don't have the time to measure and adjust, which is what Paul was just saying. So simply I'm mowing less often at a higher height. What's wrong with that? And that's exactly what we're saying. Alan, if you find that approach is working for you agronomically, that could be a real big boon for you. And I think that's an approach that you could do. You're right. You're under pressure. You may have reduced skeleton staff on site. You can't go off and do the clipping yields, or even just, I'm just going to measure clipping yield on one indicator green. And that's the thing, just to keep me in the loop.
Or as simple as it's the art of greenkeeping, the art of turf management. The turf manager's eyes can be your best measuring device, and just go with a change there. I'm going to sort of pose another question then. So we've been sat. If I'm a grass plant, unfortunately, I've been sat with my feet, my roots in water for the best part of 9 months, and you could almost predict, you could almost write the scripts as much as the unscripted pandemic that we've got now. You could almost write the script that we're going to go into a dry period, cold and dry.
Yes.
So how is that going to affect rooting, and what are the dangers? We're right in a position now where some guys may have not even had the time to commission their irrigation system, and that's an essential part. We've got to be ready for that. And we're not going to have the luxury of sort of targeted hand watering and things like that. So we've got to probably be more reliant on automated systems. How are we going to get that right? Are these roots going to be shallow in the soil? Not right now.
I mean, we're now into that period where soil temperatures are increasing. Time of year when we'd be saying root development is starting to take off. We're starting to get into new active root development time, and there is a danger that we're going to have a bit of a hangover from what was a moderately mild winter, but with very wet conditions. I think we just have to be mindful about stresses. So for me, one of the things I'm thinking about here is the ability of the plant to resist stress. So we know shallower root systems going to mean the plant is going to be less resilient to stress. So we need to focus a little bit on what we can do to help that. So looking at, do we need to, when soil temperatures are right, of course, they might not be right where you are right now, think about, do we need to apply some phosphate? Thinking about what can we do to encourage root development where we can do, and just be sympathetic. So this is where raising your height of cut is also going to be helpful in helping to mitigate that stress. So I mean, Paul, sort of for when you're talking to greenkeepers out there, and sort of what's the vibe you're getting about people's concerns with rooting? Are people concerned about how the grass is coming out of what was quite a stressful wet winter period?
Well, quite with still a lot of play, really. Well, it was either play or the courses were closed and saturated soil. So the impact of these saturated soils, we've either seen, because it was warm as well, maintenance, growth, cutting still had to apply. So it's caused a bit of compaction in the soil, or the sheer amount of water in the soil has almost sort of caused the soil particles to mix up and sort of interpack a little bit. So actually aeration is really, really important, especially deep aeration. But we're in a period of a limit, essential maintenance. So it's going to have to be as and when the time is right. Restrictions lift, and the message at the start of this year was to people was that we've got to get some deep aeration into the ground. Sports pitches, football pitches, been heavily played or closed again, saturated. Got to get deep aeration. But it's got to be at the time when it's right and the time that's safe. I understand that, but that in itself, I think, is going to help the rooting. And a question that's come up on here, somebody's mentioned about Alan Smith has said help to improve grass species, at a higher height of cut. Absolutely, because we're in a situation where we're constantly sort of pounding the crown of that plant. Certainly, any finer grasses, we might actually botanically have a year which is conducive to promoting finer grasses with more relaxed social play, social use rather than demand of competition play.
Absolutely. And I see a great question here from Adam McCall. No, we haven't overlooked them. We're coming round to them. But yeah, you're absolutely right. PGRs, plant growth regulators. So Adam said, applied a PGR 11 days ago, haven't needed to cut green since. So yeah, absolutely. These are tools in your armory. And I think making sure you're ready, that the plant is ready. Again, we don't want to do it too soon, too quickly, and suffer any damage to the plant. But if you are getting conditions where you're getting sustained growth, good soil temperatures, then absolutely get your PGR program going. This is all part of that stratagem. So in essence, we can take our strategy, our plan we had, we tear it up, throw it out the window. We've got to think laterally. We've got to be flexible in our approach. We've also got to be dynamic in response to what we're seeing on our particular sites. And I think absolutely PGRs will help in this battle in terms of helping to control growth, as will heights of cut, as will moderating and changing and adapting our nutrient inputs, when we're applying, what we're applying, checking on the spring feeds we're thinking about, perhaps moving on to something a bit more drip feeding. These are all really important strategies that we need to.
Soluble fertilizer, cheap as chips. Now, the plant growth regulator, now, normally, you'd be, certainly with the temperatures we've had, you'd be cringing in terms of, oh, wow, what's going to happen? We're going to cause some phyto shock, but we're in a position where, look, the unnormal is the new normal. Are we looking at, can we accept a bit of phyto shock to just hold things? Normally we'd be maybe putting nitrogen with it to offset that, but I think, Chris, are we in danger of detrimentally damaging us towards opening up, allowing moss, allowing weeds, or, again, I suppose we've got to suck it and see and adapt. And I suppose the plant growth regulator strategy right now with the nighttime temperatures are going to be vastly different in 2 weeks' time. Yeah,
absolutely. And you've got to know when it's right for you in your golf course or in your football pitch, in your situation, because as you rightly say, different parts of the country have got different sort of regimes at the minute. If you're down in the southeast, you've got very different conditions than if you're in the north coast of Scotland in terms of when you're ready and when you're right. You're right. You can't push things too quickly. But what you can do is look at the dosage, look at the rate, look at the interval, make sure you've got some nutrient in that tank. And I think you've got to perhaps just be a little bit cautious and be mindful about what and when and what the conditions are. But if you can, you feel comfortable, you feel confident, then yes, use it as a tool. Absolutely. Just for those folks which are joining joining us right now, welcome. Thank you very much for coming on. I've just seen an interesting question here from Alan. Does aeration not cover part of essential maintenance? That's something that's been sort of probably a talking point in our industry. The RNA have come out with some guidance notes on what the RNA believes to be essential maintenance at this time. Obviously, first and foremost, we've got to make sure we're all safe. We've got to be operating safely. We've got to keep our social distancing. But the way I've thought about this is, look, essential maintenance is what we need to do to keep that turf alive and to keep that turf going. If we have an underlying issue, which is water holding, which is what you were alluding to, Paul, in that root zone, and it needs a critical maintenance operation to relieve that, then that for me is essential maintenance. I suspect what the RNA are intending to do was kind of not be sort of wanting folks to be going out doing standard sort of program aeration, whereas I think aeration for targeted purposes could well be part of that essential maintenance. But the RNA have produced some guidance to help people guide their understanding, but it does have to be a course specific requirements. I mean, undoubtedly that's the case, but you've got to do things with common sense, with some sympathy to the turf, but also mindful of our responsibilities, our wider social responsibilities as well.
Yeah, quite. So I suppose, getting back onto the nitty-gritty of plant growth regulator here, and I'm sort of certainly in the world of golf really been sort of using GDD as a tool to get your applications, your timings quite exactly right. And I've often seen it's not so much a quantity of Trinexapac ethyl that you're applying, it's a frequency. It's how many times you hit that brake pedal. Not necessarily how hard you hit the brake pedal, which is going to give you that sort of control. And I suppose that's where you sort of tweak with the input of nitrogen, bit of seaweed or not. You just go from there. But right, so would I be right in saying, so let's say we're working on a 200 growing degree day model. So if I reapply at 200, now that 200 is just past the peak of when the product has had the main effect in the plant. So it hasn't stopped, it hasn't fully synthesized, it's still working in a plant, but it's going to drop off. We're going to see growth come back through. So the reason for that reapplication at 200 GDD is to sort of maintain that level of control. Would that be correct?
Yeah, well, I think you're looking at your growth degree day model to help program. So what you don't want to do is you absolutely don't want your grass to go in and out and in and out and in and out and in and out of regulation. So what you're looking at that model to do is that as the effect of the PGR starts to decline, the next application's gone on and been absorbed by the plant, and you get continued sort of activity from the PGR, and that's really important. We want continued regulation is way better on the plant, strength and health wise, than jumping up and down. And Glenn's joined the stream. Welcome, Glenn. Thanks very much. Glad you could join us. And Glenn's just making a valid point that, for example, for Primo Max 2 on golf and bowling greens, the application rate is 0.4 litres a hectare, and it's making sure that we've got the right doses going on at the right intervals. So make sure we get the timing right and just being sympathetic. I think that's the thought process with those models. The GDD 200 is to make sure that we keep that plant in regulation, and that's making sure we understand our temperature in our soil and our air temperature differential. And if we could do that, I think that is a valuable tool. Also seen Kyle Barrett there on the comments talking about the fact that Kyle's been using plant growth regulator sort of successfully on his football pitch right at the moment. So it's really important to use the right tool in the right way. But I think if you're used and you're set up for monitoring GDD, then absolutely. If you're not, then you've got to use a bit more intuition in terms of what you're seeing the grass plant doing. That's where if you do measure clipping yield just from one green, that can help you out, give you that indicator.
Yeah, I just picking up there. A message from Richard. Will come back to yours for information there. Site-specific plant growth regulator recommendation. Absolutely, because again, we're coming back to environmental factors being king, absolutely king in this. What response you're going to get out of products or growth anyway, and it leads on to Alan's comment there, but we're probably never out of cold spells until May. Mid-May. Now, again, a little bit of sort of site study that's looking at clip yield on a golf green down in London and recording the growth potential and GDD, and the clipping yield did not stabilize no matter what we did, nitrogen, plant growth regulator or anything. It was not controllable until nighttime temperatures really settled, and that's exactly what you said there, Alan. That was after mid-May. Then we become more in control. Beyond that, I'm sorry guys, it's a bit of a lottery and we've got to adjust. Think very quick on the feet. Obviously that's normally in a situation where you're presenting surfaces for play. We're not at the moment, so any sort of oops, that didn't go quite so right. There's a bit of forgiveness in that right now.
Yeah, and I think it's very much we've got to tailor our approaches and sort of, Richard, you make a valid point here, sort of in terms about site specificity and essential maintenance, and just having had a look at the RNA's essential maintenance guidance note, there's nothing in there which explicitly sort of prohibits or doesn't recommend the use of PGRs. I think if in fact the use of a PGR and it can help the amount of the number of mowing operations on a golf course, that could actually be benefit for helping to reduce contact time between individuals. So again, but it's got to be based on the site, the requirements, and what the grass is doing after all. So, and I don't think the RNA meant these guidance to be prescriptive. They're very much there to highlight and get people's thought process trained in on what we're doing, why we're doing it. We should only be doing the things which we really need to do to keep that plant healthy, to keep the turf alive. And I think that's where they're coming from.
Because if the plant's not healthy, Chris, and we start to thin our surfaces, what are the problems are we going to see?
Well, we've got a whole heap of pain coming then through the summer and into next year, or into the fall even. We're going to end up with competitive niches for weeds, for moss. We're going to end up with plant that if we do start to get into drier periods where we get water stress coming in, then we're going to end up with more sort of potential drought stress symptoms, again resulting in even further thinning of swards. That's primary then for your niche, for your ingress and invasion of undesirable grasses, weeds, moss, and then an unhealthy weak sward going into August, September time. And if we do get a strong disease season, we're going to be in trouble.
I think we've seen most issues with moss, certainly sort of silver thread mosses on predominant dry, thin, stressy areas of sward, and once that sets hold, that's potentially harder to deal with than some of your weed grasses.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and could be a real challenge and an ongoing issue then that you've got. And I think that's the thing, is some care and attention and thought process now to help maintain health and density can pay dividends going into the back end of the year and into the future. If we can help prevent the problems from getting into the turf in the first place, that's got to be the best ITM approach we can follow. And some interesting comments there. There's one from Alan Smith here. If you were to get involved in GDD, is there a benefit to just picking 1 or 2 greens as your show greens, almost like when you have a green that's your stress and disease show green, and then base your program around that? And I think, yes, I kind of, GDD is an indicator. It's no different to collecting clipping yield. It is there to help give you insight into perhaps when is the right time for doing something. And I think if you marry that in with sort of collecting information on targeted greens, on clipping yield, on soil water content, it's just building your image up of your vision of the invisible around your golf course, helping you to get that planning, get that finer detail on what you want. So absolutely be using some target greens of your different climatic or environmental sort of climates or around your golf course is really important. So yeah, go for that. I think that's gonna help you.
So without wear, right? So this is, as I said before, everybody's always dreamed of, I haven't got golfers to worry about, I haven't got teams coming out and training, etc. So we've always wanted it, but what problems is it going to cause us? Where can actually be a good thing? See it on bowling greens. See it on bowling greens. Why are bowling greens going to spring with tons of moss? Okay, it's been winter, it's been dark, but there hasn't been any feet across. There hasn't been that natural scratching, scarification. What? Yes. And your trial work that you do, where you're experts in applying controlled wear. When you don't, what do you see?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, how many of us have walked on those the places on the greens that we never put pin positions? We never get where. Where do you get the moss first? In those areas, because the competition between the sward and the moss doesn't like wear, doesn't like being scarified. So if we don't put the wear on, we're absolutely going to probably see a little bit more moss ingress coming in and moss hanging around for a little longer. That's why we need to focus on getting targeted, appropriate nutrition into that sward, maintaining canopy density. I think without wear, I mean, the grass is quite happy, but almost the wear at a low level will be helping to, for example, strengthen the plant to some degree as well. What we don't want to do is where we get to the conditions of excessive wear with undue stress, traffic routes, compaction. But a little bit of wear is not necessarily a bad thing. Grass plants, after all, have been evolved to be trampled by herd animals, not trampled all the time, all day. This is me taking a bit of a leap here, but in reality, their evolutionary biology and physiology is there to design being trampled, resist trampling. So a little bit of wear, actually, they're perfectly adapted for it. Too much wear is the problem. Too little wear is more of an agronomic challenge about the niches, about the stresses that are going on in that ecosystem. And we change the balance from perhaps grasses more towards other plants, mosses, weeds as well. So it comes with a yin and a yang. There are some benefits of wear, but there are also some downsides. I mean,
talking of yin and yang, you're setting this up lovely for the next episode of Elephants with Bob Taylor.
Absolutely. And here's a comment from Tim. Hi, Tim. Hope you're doing well. Keep safe across there in the wrong side of the Pennines. So Tim's sort of saying this is a good idea. How can we sort of add more intended sand to the greens during this period? So sanding is one of those things, and sanding is one of those ones, those things that the RNA's kind of said, in their view, isn't necessarily essential maintenance, and is a tricky one. And I think you've got to look at your individual situation, but the guidance from the RNA is that top dressing, for example, isn't necessarily considered to be essential maintenance to keep that plant going and keep that surface going. What that is going to mean is that if we take that view, we are probably going to have to be thinking now what we're going to be doing through those summer months to help make sure that we don't have excessive increases in organic matter accumulation. How are we going to deal with surface levels?
Look, I mean, yeah, great question there, Tim. And I had this discussion earlier today with a client who, look, reality, we want to be retaining jobs, we want to be retaining our budgets, etc. But look, everybody's going to change, everybody's going to adapt. What are the cost savings that can come in, and your annual volume of top dressing it has a potential to reduce, but it is dependent on the control of growth. If we allow growth to dominate and build organic matter, and we don't top dress, it's going to be issues. But if we're in a position of pulling things back and we can control the growth, we might be able to get away with it. But we're talking about essential practice and maybe top dressing not allowed now. But look, this is a fluid situation. Things will change. Restrictions will become lifted. If anybody could look into a crystal ball, I'm only guessing, but I'd be guessing that maybe the maintenance will be allowed to increase. It might get worse yet, but then we're allowed to increase. But I think we'll then go back to social use, social golf, not competition. Or it may well be that the play still isn't allowed, but you can do a little bit more. People can get back to work. Now that presents an opportunity to do a little bit more. People will be glad. Let's everybody just get outside and enjoy sports surfaces again. Don't be worried if there's a bit of sand on the greens, or just get out there, be healthy, have a walk, fresh air, summer conditions. Let everybody enjoy life for a little bit. So if we can do that, there will be a time we'll get there. We can do that, and then we can catch up a little bit. So I think, whilst it might be frustrating right now, it'll change. The opportunity will come. I think the key thing is, let's say life's going to go back to some sort of normality later in the summer or autumn, whenever. Right at that time, when somebody says, "I've got my end of season renovations planned," that ain't going to happen. There's going to be no appetite there to say, "Right, I've got my coring, my scarification, my deep verge draining, etc. planned." Right after the last competition in sort of early September, because that's when I always do it. There's going to be no appetite for that. So I think we've got to be proactive sooner rather than later, as and when restrictions ease.
Absolutely. And in sort of, for example, taking the RNA guidance, it says there, absolutely, given the wide range of golf courses, construction types, sward types, environments, maintenance programs and approaches, adaptation is needed. An adaptation to these guidance is needed, and this guidance I'm anticipating will be refreshed, will be renewed as we go through. Just to reiterate, Glenn, great question. I've highlighted it because we talked a little bit about it. Absolutely, I'm a big fan of measuring clipping yield as a tool, but you're absolutely right. It can be difficult to do right now when there are a lot of constraints on resource, on time, and as Paul made the point earlier on. Very much got to be. This is where we start pulling from the sort of greenkeeper's intuition. We're starting to look at simple things, and it might just be taking a single green or even a half a green, or whatever we're going to do. Even a triple width going down that green, and every time we're doing the same stripe, that can. Some information is better than none. But if you understand to see the growth, then go with that. But I think the more we understand how that turf is growing, the better. It can only be a good thing.
I think this is where so difficult to be prescriptive in terms of guidelines with cut 3 times a week, cut twice a week. Look, if your growth potential is so strong, that nitrogen pool is firing up because of the temperatures. If you are then taking too much grass off because you are cutting every 2-3 days, it's only going to encourage it to grow more. Yeah. Plus you'll probably get a bad quality of cut as well, and injury, etc. But it might have to be adaptive too. Look, the whole topic of this was adapting to change. Absolutely.
And Tim, great comment there from you. Tim's saying that over there in the wrong side of the Pennines, over Burnley way, they're not those guys not have to mow hardly at all. So yeah, you've got to adapt your program to what's happening on your course. But I think the key thing is, first and foremost with all this, is keeping yourself, your employees and others safe. But at the same time, we've got to do what we need to do to keep the turf alive. We've got to keep that facility. After all, football clubs, golf clubs, the key infrastructure is the facility. And if we don't have the playing surfaces, we don't have a business that can be sustained to the other side of it. And that's where we're at. So it's trying to do the maintenance, the planning in a sensible way to try and ensure the ongoing survival of these tremendous sports facilities that are out there. And that's why sort of these kind of conversations, the questions you're asking, are fabulous, to help everyone share the knowledge, share the experience.
Great. I think we got about 7 minutes of our 45 before the meter runs out on us. So invite any more questions to come through from listeners joining us today. I'm going to ask one more question for you, Chris. Right. Look, I'm. I said about there's going to be zero appetite to do maintenance. Heavy maintenance later in the year when we're back to play, hopefully. And I can't do my normal renovation now. Heck, what are we going to do? Help me.
Absolutely. So, if you can't do your normal renovation now, what you need to be doing is you need to be thinking about your plan. You think about what you're trying to achieve. Where are you starting from? How healthy is your turf? What are the condition of the surfaces? What's your growing conditions like? And again, guys, this isn't you on your own having to do this, me against the world. Get advice, get help, talk to people like the STRI, talk to your agronomists, talk to yourselves. Start thinking about how you're going to address this. And it might mean, for example, that we need to do less disruptive, more ongoing progressive renovations as we go through into the playing season, because we know what's going to happen. Weather's going to get right, restrictions are going to be lifted, folk want to play on the golf course. And one of the key messages we have to get is that this is a precious resource. If we don't help keep the golf course healthy, we're going to be in trouble in the long run because problems build up. So this is managing this internally within clubs, having that conversation, say, look, guys, we haven't been in to go and do that renovation work we needed to do. We still need to address those fundamental agronomic issues and challenges. So we now need to have a plan. It might be, rather than a short but intensive period, we have to have a more extensive, less just disruptive, but it's going to have to go over a much longer time period to help try and get some balance back. So you need to think about it, tear your old plan up, think about what your issues are, think about what are the challenges, think about your environment when you're ready. What are the key operations that you really need to do? Get some advice, get some help. There's loads of advice, there's loads of help out there at the moment. A lot of people wanting to help and help guys out with what is and isn't working. So get your help, get some support, and put together a good solid program. Think now about what you're going to do when restrictions lift. If restrictions are lifted in the end of April, I'm probably reticent to think about that time frame. End of May, probably more realistic. Into June, let's think about what we could realistically then get on and do. And in the meantime, make sure our essential maintenance that we're carrying on is getting our grass plant in as healthy a condition, ready for that period as we could possibly be. I think, and that's my view.
Yeah, if you're saying there, Chris, think about what you can do. Like if you had sat with grass seed in stock, whether it's may have formed part and parcel of your mid-season bit of work or whatever, if you could get that into the ground earlier when restrictions lift, one of the first things you could do. I'm still of the mindset that there is going to be low volumes of wear and play on sports surfaces this year. So this could be the year when you could make more improvements than you've done in the last 3 or 5 years together, if things fell into place there. But who knows? So got a few more questions coming here, Chris.
We do. We've got one, and Stuart. Always happy when I see a comment from you, Stuart. Always love
good to hear from you, Stuart.
Always love having chats with you. Really great question. So what's your thoughts on pitch and putt type maintenance? Basically minimal. Mowing infrequently, greens at higher heights are cut with minimal inputs. Absolutely, and that's what we've been talking about, is very much, look, tear up the rule book, think in a different way. And I think this very much right now is going to be a good strategy for many clubs, is to think about keeping it low in terms of input, not mowing too frequently, and increasing that height of cut, because if no one's playing on the thing, we're not looking to achieve 8 to 10 foot on the stimp meter. That is the last thing on our mind right now. Our mind should be focused on plant health, sward integrity, getting out of this period on the other side with the healthiest, happiest sward we can do within the confines of carrying out that essential maintenance. So great question, Stuart. Thank you very much. Always appreciated.
Yeah, and Stuart, just to echo there, I think you picked up on that. A higher height of cut with minimal cuts. A higher a higher plant height is not going to want to grow quite as much anyway. And if we keep within that 1/3 cut rule, I think that again will really help with inputs, because again, plant growth regulation has got a big part to play. But there'll be some turf managers out there that want to apply it, but sorry, budgets won't allow. We've got to think of another way around it.
Absolutely, and I think it's having a flexible approach and thinking outside the box, thinking dynamically. I think that's where the success is to be had. That's where people will really make the difference. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask the dumb question. There is no such thing as a dumb question. I ask lots every day and always get some intriguing answers, and that's what it's all about. We're going to have to wrap up soon, guys, because as all of you know, I will talk until everyone else on the stream is dead, and sort of their ears are bleeding and can't take any more. So we're going to have to wrap it up. It's going to be hours and hours. Be great to have you. Go on, Paul.
Keep talking, Chris, then we'll have to come up with a new title for show. At the moment, it's Springtime Turf. If you keep talking, we'll have to get a new presenter for the summer. Absolutely,
because I'll be out of a job. So thank you very much. It's been tremendous to have you all here. Loved having this comment. I just love talking. Not being around the bush. I love talking. I love talking tech. I love talking grass. I love being a geek. So until next time, till you can join another STRI live stream on Facebook. Thank you for coming, and thanks from me, and thanks from Paul. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Take care. Stay safe. Have a great weekend, and hopefully see you in the very near future on Facebook.
Stay safe.
Bye, guys.